Her husband mocked her for being a nobody after divorce. But at a gala years later, the scent of rosemary chicken filled the air as Ava carefully lit the last candle on the dining table. The soft instrumental music played in the background, and the wine glasses shimmered under the dim light. She glanced at the clock, 7:46 p.m. Daniel was late, but she wasn't worried yet. Their 10th anniversary had always been important to her. She had gone the extra mile, just like every year, making sure everything was perfect. The table was set, Sophie was at her grandmother's for the night, and the house was silent. Then the door creaked open. Ava's heart fluttered with anticipation. But as soon as Daniel walked in, she noticed something was off. He didn't smile. He didn't comment on the aroma or the setup. He looked exhausted, detached. He dropped his briefcase, loosened his tie, and then, as if spitting out something that had been stuck in his throat for days, he said, "We need to talk." Ava's smile faltered, her hands tightening around the chair she had just pulled out for him. "Now?" she asked, already sensing the weight of his words. He didn't sit. Instead, he paced slowly, as if rehearsing something painful. "I don't want to do this anymore," he finally said, his eyes avoiding hers. "This marriage. It's not working." Ava froze. She looked at the food, still steaming, and then back at him. "Is this about the argument last week?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," he snapped, "it's not about any one thing. I've been unhappy for a long time." His voice carried a finality that shook her to the core. The celebration turned into a silent funeral of 10 years, buried under one sentence. And just like that, the anniversary dinner turned cold. For days, Ava lived in denial, believing that maybe Daniel was just overwhelmed, maybe it was stress, maybe they could fix it. But the truth came 2 weeks later when she saw him through the frosted glass of a downtown cafe, laughing with a woman she didn't recognize. Younger, polished, and wrapped in a tailored blazer that screamed designer. Ava waited outside, frozen in place, watching as he leaned in, brushing a loose strand of hair from the woman's face. It wasn't just a friendship. That much was clear. That evening, when Daniel came to pick up Sophie, she confronted him. He didn't deny it. "Her name is Rachel," he said with disturbing calmness. "She understands me in ways you never did." Ava stared at him, her voice caught in her throat. "So this is about you feeling misunderstood?" she asked. "No," he replied, "it's about me not wanting to settle for small." That word, small, haunted Ava. Her world hadn't felt small to her. She had loved deeply, supported him through job changes, stayed up with Sophie through every fever, and kept their house a home. But Daniel now viewed her life, her sacrifices, as insufficient. "Rachel has vision," he added. "She comes from a family that moves in real circles, not PTA meetings and local markets." Ava didn't respond. She couldn't. She felt as though years of her life had been rewritten in one moment, reduced to a footnote in Daniel's pursuit of prestige. He turned to leave but stopped to say one last thing, "I'll make sure you're taken care of. But I don't want to be tied down to your version of life anymore." The door clicked behind him, and Ava sank to the floor, her world caving in around her. The courtroom was sterile, impersonal, and cold, not unlike the demeanor Daniel had adopted in recent months. Ava sat silently beside her attorney, her heart pounding as Daniel's lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Preston, stood and began painting a version of her that was unrecognizable. "My client provided the sole financial support while Mrs. Whitman chose not to return to work," he began. She has no career, no contributions to joint investments, and seeks support that is disproportionate to her efforts. Eva's hands trembled under the table. She wanted to scream, to remind them that she had given up her career for their daughter, that her days were spent raising Sophie while Daniel climbed ladders at his firm. But none of that seemed to matter here. Every memory was dissected, reframed, weaponized. Then came the moment that would scar her more than anything else. Preston turned toward Ava and coldly stated, "Let's be honest, Your Honor, Mrs. Whitman has no discernible value in the workforce. She hasn't worked in years. We're not questioning her worth as a mother, but she mustn't assume that entitles her to a lifestyle she hasn't earned." Ava felt as though the room had gone silent. She glanced at Daniel, but he didn't flinch. He didn't defend her. He let the words hang in the air like truth. The judge didn't comment, just nodded slightly and continued taking notes. By the end of the hearing, Ava had lost more than half of what they'd built together. The house was sold. Sophie's custody was shared. Her dignity? That had been left in the courtroom, trampled beneath legal jargon and condescension. Sophie didn't understand. At 9, how could she? One moment, her parents shared a home, the next, she was packing bags and dividing weekends. Ava tried her best to maintain consistency, to keep Sophie's world intact, but the emotional toll was showing. Sophie began acting out, withdrawing in school and refusing to talk about her time at her father's house. "Daddy and Rachel have a bigger TV," she said one night, almost guiltily. "And they let me eat dessert first." Ava smiled gently, brushing her daughter's hair. "Different homes have different rules," she said, hiding the sting in her chest. But later that week, Sophie returned from Daniel's place unusually quiet. After dinner, Ava found her in the bathroom, wiping away tears. "Rachel said you work at a store now, is that true?" Ava knelt beside her. "Yes," she said softly. "I work at a grocery store. That's how I'm helping us now." Sophie nodded, but Ava could see the confusion. The daughter of a man who once wore tailored suits was now being raised by a mother who scanned barcodes. Later, Sophie whispered, "Rachel said I might be embarrassed if my friends find out." Ava's heart fractured in that moment. She pulled Sophie close, holding her tight. "Never be ashamed of where you come from," she said firmly. "What matters is how we treat people, how hard we work, and who we become, not what others say about us." Sophie said nothing. But in her silence, Ava saw the weight of the world settle onto the shoulders of a little girl just beginning to understand betrayal. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Ava adjusted her green apron and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. The grocery store was modest, but it was honest work. She scanned items with quiet focus, nodding politely at customers, many of whom didn't even look her in the eye. Occasionally, she'd spot someone she knew, a former neighbor, a mom from Sophie's school, and the awkward silence that followed was often worse than any gossip. Still, she endured. Every paycheck mattered. Every hour she stood on her feet was a step away from the shadows Daniel had cast over her. On her lunch breaks, she would sit alone in the employee lounge, scrolling through job boards, hoping something more promising might appear. But her resume, years of homemaking, unpaid labor, was met with silence. One rainy Tuesday, she overheard two customers whispering at the end of aisle 6. "Is that Ava Whitman? I heard her husband left her for that woman who owns the art gallery downtown. She used to be on the PTA, didn't she?" Ava stood frozen behind the shelves of canned beans, her chest tight. She felt like a museum relic being picked apart by bored onlookers. When she returned to the front, Daniel was waiting in her line. It was the first time he had seen her in uniform. He raised an eyebrow and chuckled. "So this is your empire now?" Ava said nothing, just continued scanning his items. "Don't worry," he added, lowering his voice. "Rachel and I are doing great. She thinks you've found your true calling." He walked off without another word. Ava's hands shook, but she didn't cry. Not there. Not in front of him. That night, however, the tears came freely, as they always did when no one was looking. Weeks passed, and Ava began to master her rhythm at the store, learning codes for produce, helping elderly customers carry their bags, and memorizing coupon policies. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady. That stability was enough for now. Until Daniel came again. This time, Sophie was with him, looking uncomfortable as she trailed behind her father. He smirked at Ava as he placed organic yogurt and imported cheeses on the conveyor. "Do you scan these faster if they're expensive?" he joked, loud enough for the customer behind to hear. Ava's face flushed, but she kept her composure. After paying, he leaned over and whispered, "This is what you chose over Rachel's world?" Then louder, in front of Sophie, "Your mom's just a cashier now, huh?" Sophie looked away, biting her lip. Ava clenched her fists beneath the counter. The humiliation burned deep, but she said nothing. Not there. Not in front of her daughter. Daniel walked out with his head high, but Ava's remained lower than ever. That night, Sophie quietly asked, "Is Dad right?" Ava answered only, "Being kind is never wrong. And neither is working hard." But her voice trembled. Among the faces Ava saw each day, there was one that always brought her peace, an older gentleman with gentle eyes and a slow, thoughtful way of speaking. He came every Thursday at 9 a.m., always buying the same items: bread, soup, and a single bar of dark chocolate. "Don't let people change your light," he told her once, after she helped a frustrated customer who had shouted at her. "You're built stronger than you think." Ava had smiled weakly then, not fully believing him. His name was Mr. Bennett. Over time, he'd linger a little longer, asking how Sophie was doing or bringing her a small hard candy wrapped in wax paper. Ava found his presence calming, like a father figure she never had. He once said he'd been a businessman but had slowed down after retiring. "There's something about watching how people move in grocery stores," he mused. "You learn a lot about character from carts and checkout lines." Ava laughed, realizing how rarely anyone really talked to her like she mattered. With Mr. Bennett, she felt human again. One quiet morning, Ava heard a loud thud near the front entrance. Shoppers gasped and gathered. When she rushed over, her heart dropped. Mr. Bennett was lying on the floor, pale and gasping. Without thinking, Ava knelt beside him, grabbing a cold bottle from the cooler to place under his neck and calling the manager to dial 911. "Stay with me, Mr. Bennett," she whispered, holding his hand. "Just breathe." Paramedics arrived within minutes, and Ava rode with him in the ambulance, refusing to leave his side until they reached the hospital. Later that evening, she received a call. "I wanted to thank you," Mr. Bennett said, voice weaker but steady. "You probably saved my life." Most people would have panicked. Ava dismissed the praise, but he insisted. "I owe you. When I'm better, meet me for coffee. There's something I'd like to ask you." A week passed. He called again. This time, he wasn't joking. "Come to Bennett Textiles next Monday. Ask for me at the front desk." Ava blinked at the name. It was a company she vaguely recognized from old city directories. She had no idea how much that invitation would change everything. Nervous but curious, Ava arrived at the downtown building, dressed in the most professional outfit she could piece together. The lobby of Bennett Textiles was grand, though a bit dated, with photographs of old factories lining the walls. She asked for Mr. Bennett at reception and was ushered upstairs. He greeted her with a warm smile, wearing a cardigan instead of a suit. "I've been watching you," he said calmly, "and I don't mean that in a creepy way." He gestured for her to sit. "I see people for who they are. And you have something others don't." He explained that the company had been struggling to stay afloat after the retirement of several key staff. "I need someone grounded. Someone who sees people, not just numbers. Someone like you." Ava blinked. "But I don't know anything about business," she said. Mr. Bennett shrugged. "Neither did I when I started. You'll learn. You've got grit, Ava. That's rarer than any degree." He offered her a junior admin position. The pay was modest, but better than the store. Ava hesitated, then slowly nodded. "Okay. I'll try." She didn't know it yet, but that yes would echo for years. The first week at Bennett Textiles was harder than Ava expected. The office was a strange world of hurried footsteps, clipped tones, and unfamiliar software. Many staff barely looked her in the eye, and some muttered under their breath when she asked questions. She could feel it, the judgment, the dismissal. She was the charity case, brought in by the aging founder. Ava overheard one conversation in the break room. Did he really pull her from a grocery store? That's bold. The laughter that followed echoed in her mind all night. Still, Ava didn't flinch. She arrived early and stayed late, watching tutorials on spreadsheets and reading old reports left in dusty filing cabinets. When others went to lunch, she stayed behind to learn the software. Some days, she felt like an imposter. Other days, she held on to the memory of Sophie's hug when Ava told her she had a new job. "That's cool, Mom," Sophie had said. "Does it have a desk?" Ava smiled, remembering. Yes, it had a desk, and behind that desk, a quiet storm was beginning to gather strength. Ava wouldn't be invisible much longer. By the end of her first week, Ava could already feel the tension surrounding her presence in the office. Though no one said anything outright, there were glances when she walked past, and conversations that stopped the moment she entered the room. On Friday, a woman from accounting named Marla accidentally left her microphone unmuted during a video call. "Why are we wasting time training a grocery store clerk?" she muttered. Ava heard every word. The silence that followed was deafening. That night, Ava sat alone in the dim office, her fingers resting on the keyboard. The sting of humiliation pulsed through her chest, but she didn't cry. She opened a folder labeled Bennett Archives and began reading about the company's past, product lines, client relations, branding. She jotted down notes on anything she didn't understand and made lists of questions to ask, even if no one wanted to answer them. Her work ethic wasn't for show, it was survival. She refused to give them a reason to call her an outsider again. With every passing week, Ava grew more familiar with the company's rhythm. She learned to anticipate her manager's needs, kept track of deadlines better than some of her seasoned colleagues, and even corrected a shipping error before it became a costly mistake. Still, the air around her remained cold. People called her persistent, but never capable. It was as if her past in retail had permanently labeled her as unfit for corporate life. Ava kept her head down, determined not to give anyone a reason to doubt her effort. Every night, long after the last employee left, she stayed behind to practice formatting reports and interpreting balance sheets. One evening, Mr. Bennett found her in the conference room surrounded by papers. "Most folks don't last this long," he said softly. Eva looked up, startled. "I'm not most folks," she replied. He smiled, placed a coffee beside her, and walked away without another word. It was the first time in years someone had looked at her and seen potential instead of pity. Monday morning brought a setback. Eva had compiled a quarterly report using the wrong data set, and it was printed and distributed before anyone caught the mistake. In the meeting that followed, her manager scolded her sharply in front of others. "This is what happens when we hire people without experience," someone whispered. Eva's face burned with shame. She stood, apologized sincerely, and offered to fix the issue by day's end. "You have until 5, her manager said coldly. "Don't make it worse." Eva returned to her desk and worked relentlessly, retracing every line of data and correcting the miscalculations. By 4:45 p.m., she had a revised report ready, accurate, double-checked, and formatted better than the original. She delivered it without ceremony, expecting nothing. But the next morning, her manager quietly placed a post-it note on her desk, "Thank you." It was perfect. It wasn't praise, but it was acknowledgement. And to Eva, that was a win worth remembering. 2 weeks later, Eva was invited, by accident, it seemed, to sit in on a marketing strategy meeting. She listened carefully as the team pitched a new branding idea for one of their legacy textile lines. It was flashy, sleek, and completely disconnected from the company's history. As the executives nodded, Eva hesitated, then raised her hand. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said nervously, "but this doesn't feel like something Bennett customers would connect with. It feels cold." The room went silent. A younger associate rolled her eyes. "And you would know that how?" Eva paused. "Because I've listened to customers my whole life. You can't sell warmth with steel tones and buzzwords." No one spoke. Mr. Bennett, seated quietly in the corner, leaned forward. "She's right," he said. "Our brand is built on heritage and heart." This pitch forgot both. That moment didn't change everything, but Ava's presence was no longer ignored. After the meeting, Mr. Bennett invited Eva to walk with him through the factory floor. "You see things others miss," he said. "That's a gift." They walked past rows of machinery, and he pointed out where old processes had changed, how workers adapted, and why culture mattered more than image. "I want you to learn the business," he continued. "Not just from behind a desk. Come by twice a week after your shift. I'll teach you what I know." Eva nodded, humbled and eager. Over the following months, their meetings became a ritual. He taught her about supplier relationships, margins, negotiation tactics, and leadership philosophies. He didn't sugarcoat the challenges. He didn't patronize. He simply shared. Eva soaked up everything like dry earth after rain. Her confidence grew, not because someone gave her approval, but because she was learning to earn it with every step forward. 3 months into her mentorship, Eva stumbled across an abandoned proposal in a shared company drive, an old rebranding concept designed for a line of eco-friendly fabrics that never made it to production. The idea was clean, modern, and deeply aligned with current consumer trends. She brought it to Mr. Bennett. "This has potential," she said. He reviewed it silently before nodding. "The team gave up on this too quickly. Maybe it needs new hands." He gave her permission to present a revised pitch to marketing. The day of the pitch, Ava stood before a room of skeptical faces, heart pounding. She had redesigned the visuals, built a case backed by current data, and even outlined a rollout plan. "We don't need to chase trends," she concluded, "we need to remember who we are and speak that language with clarity." When she finished, the room was quiet. Then Mr. Bennett clapped. Slowly, others joined. Marketing agreed to pilot the line for regional markets. It was a small green light, but to Ava, it felt like sunrise. The pilot launch exceeded expectations. Orders outpaced projections by 35%, and customer feedback was overwhelmingly positive. Suddenly, the office air shifted. Ava was no longer just the woman from the grocery store. Colleagues began asking her opinion during meetings. People nodded as she passed in the hallways. Some even smiled. Her confidence bloomed, not with arrogance, but with quiet certainty. She had finally proven her place, not just to them, but to herself. Mr. Bennett called her in. "You did more than revive a product line," he said. "You revived our identity." He handed her a new badge, Special Project Coordinator. It wasn't an executive title, but it came with better pay and more autonomy. Ava went home that evening and found Sophie waiting with cupcakes she had baked herself. "To celebrate Mom's promotion," she shouted. Ava laughed, tears rising. For the first time in years, she felt like her daughter was proud of her. The next morning, Ava received a call from Sophie's school. Her daughter had gotten into an argument with another student during recess. "She said I was poor, that my mom was a cashier and didn't even go to college," Sophie explained, eyes brimming with frustration. Ava hugged her tightly, heart aching. "You told me I shouldn't be ashamed," Sophie whispered. "But it still hurts." Ava took a deep breath, then said, "We don't fight lies with fists. We fight them by living better truths." Later that night, Ava sat at her desk and penned a short letter to Sophie. She slid it under her pillow. It read, "Success isn't about what they see, it's about what you build when no one's watching. You're already stronger than they'll ever understand." The next day, Sophie handed Ava a drawing, her standing tall, arms wide, with a bright gold star above her head. Underneath, it read, "My mom is a builder." Ava kept it in her purse from then on. At a school fundraiser, Ava found herself face to face with Daniel and Rachel for the first time since starting at Bennett Textiles. Rachel, radiant in a designer dress, raised her eyebrows as she approached. "Oh, Ava," she cooed, "still keeping busy with that little job of yours?" Daniel smirked beside her. "She's managing fabrics now," he added, as if mocking her silently. Ava smiled politely. "Actually, I just helped relaunch a sustainable line that revived an entire division. But I'm sure charity events are fulfilling too." Rachel's smile faltered. "Well," she said sharply, "I suppose some people are happy with small wins." Ava tilted her head. "Sometimes small wins are just the start of something much bigger." She walked away, not because she had to, but because she had outgrown the need to explain herself. Rachel watched her go, unsure whether to feel annoyed or threatened. Daniel said nothing. Sophie, watching from a distance, grinned. A few weeks later, an envelope arrived at Ava's office bearing the seal of a prominent industry board. It was a formal recognition of her work in revitalizing Bennett Textiles' image and improving customer engagement. Mr. Bennett entered moments later with a rare gleam in his eyes. "They don't hand these out easily," he said, tapping the paper. "Your name is becoming known in circles that matter." Ava stared at the letter in disbelief. She wasn't used to being seen by those beyond her immediate world. As word spread, she began receiving invitations, conferences, roundtables, even mentorship requests. She felt the momentum building around her, but she kept her focus steady. Every time she stepped into a room, she carried not just her knowledge, but the memory of pushing grocery carts and wiping tears off Sophie's cheeks. She hadn't forgotten the silence, the judgment, or the nights she thought it would never get better. And that was exactly why she was ready for what came next. During a quarterly board meeting, Mr. Bennett presented a proposal to expand Ava's role beyond project coordination. "She's revitalized more than one product line," he told the room. "She's restructured how we think." Some board members were skeptical. "She lacks a formal business degree," one said. Another added, "She started in retail, can she lead at scale?" But Mr. Bennett held firm. "Experience is earned, not inherited. And she's earned it in full." Later that week, Ava received a letter with the board seal. She was being promoted to Chief Operations Officer, effective immediately. The news left her speechless. Her title was now second only to Mr. Bennett himself. In the elevator the next morning, an older executive who once ignored her said, "Congratulations, ma'am." She smiled, nodded, and stepped out. At her new office door, she paused. It had her name on it. And this time, no one could erase it. That night, Ava and Sophie sat on the living room floor, surrounded by pizza boxes and open textbooks. "So, coup?" Sophie asked with a mischievous grin. "What does that even mean?" Ava laughed, tousling her daughter's hair. "It means I help run the whole company now." Sophie's eyes widened. "That's like being the boss?" Ava nodded. "Something like that." Sophie scribbled on her notebook and then held it up. "My mom is the boss." Ava felt her throat tighten. They spent the evening talking about school, ambition, and what it meant to rise from difficult places. "You know," Sophie said thoughtfully, "you don't talk about Dad much anymore." Ava leaned back. "That's because our future matters more than our past." Sophie nodded. "He doesn't scare me anymore." In that moment, Ava realized something far more powerful than promotion had happened. Sophie wasn't just growing up, she was growing free. Weeks later, a letter embossed in gold arrived at Ava's office. It was an invitation to speak at a prestigious business gala, an event known for hosting the region's most influential leaders. The theme that year was resilience and leadership. Mr. Bennett stood beside her as she read it. "You're the perfect voice for it," he said. "Your story is exactly what they need to hear." Ava hesitated. "What if I don't belong in a room like that?" He smiled. "Ava, you built your seat at the table. Now use it." She spent days preparing, reflecting on how far she had come and the many pieces she had rebuilt along the way. She thought of sleepless nights, grocery aisles, classroom tears, and quiet victories. Her speech was personal, but not self-indulgent. It was about grit, dignity, and quiet strength. On the evening of the gala, she stood before the mirror in a deep emerald dress, her hair swept up. Sophie appeared in the doorway. "You look like a superhero," she whispered. Ava smiled. "Tonight, I speak like one." The ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and conversations, waiters weaving through guests with silver trays. As Ava stepped through the grand entrance, a familiar voice called out. Well, well. I didn't realize this was open to the public." It was Daniel, dressed in a tailored suit, Rachel clinging to his arm. Ava turned slowly, her gaze calm. "Evening," she said with a polite nod. Rachel looked her up and down. "Did you sneak in with the catering staff?" Ava held her smile. "Actually, I'm one of the speakers tonight." Daniel blinked. "You're speaking?" Rachel tried to cover her surprise with a smirk. "Well, how charming." Ava didn't flinch. "I'm glad you're here. You'll finally get to hear the full story." As she walked away, Rachel's grip on Daniel's arm tightened. "She's bluffing," she muttered. Daniel said nothing, watching Ava disappear into the crowd with a sense of growing unease. As the MC took the stage, the crowd quieted. "Tonight, we honor resilience, the kind not born from privilege, but from perseverance," he said. "Please welcome our keynote speaker, Ava Whitman." The spotlight found her as gasps rose around the room. Daniel turned pale. Rachel's wine glass froze halfway to her lips. Ava stepped onto the stage, poised, her voice steady. "10 years ago, I was told I would never amount to more than a grocery store cashier," she began. She spoke not with bitterness, but clarity. "I was overlooked, mocked, even humiliated. But I kept going. Because dignity isn't given, it's chosen." The audience leaned in. Her words carried weight, not because they were loud, but because they were true. She ended with a soft but powerful line, "You don't have to be born important to become important. Sometimes, all it takes is refusing to disappear." Thunderous applause followed. Daniel sat frozen, unable to look at her. For the first time, Rachel had nothing to say. As Ava descended the stage, the applause continued, echoing through the grand ballroom like a tidal wave of validation. Dozens of attendees rose to their feet, some dabbing their eyes, others whispering to each other about how moved they were. The MC reached for her hand, whispering, "That was the most powerful speech we've had in years." Ava smiled softly, her heart full, but steady. She spotted Sophie near the back, beaming with pride, eyes glistening. Daniel remained seated, expression blank, but his fingers twitched slightly, as if trying to grasp something already lost. Rachel leaned over, trying to whisper something reassuring, but he didn't respond. His world, the one he believed Ava would never belong to, had just crowned her its centerpiece. Ava walked off stage and was immediately surrounded by executives, entrepreneurs, and journalists asking for meetings. But the only voice she searched for in the crowd was her daughter's. That same evening, the press began circulating headlines, from cashier to COO, Ava Whitman's story shakes the gala. Mr. Bennett called to say he was proud beyond words. Messages from other women flooded Ava's inbox, young professionals, single mothers, even strangers who had watched her speech online. They shared stories of struggle, of starting over, and thanked her for giving them something more than hope, proof that survival could evolve into triumph. Meanwhile, Daniel's startup, funded primarily through Rachel's family, was struggling. Investors were growing skeptical, and now, whispers from the gala spread like wildfire through corporate circles. Some asked why Ava was never part of Daniel's venture. Others remembered his divorce and began to question his judgment. Rachel, once amused by Ava's failures, now watched as her own circle leaned away from Daniel, charmed instead by the woman he'd left behind. A week later, Ava was invited to a panel at an executive forum. As she prepared backstage, Daniel approached quietly, his expression unreadable. "That night, your speech. It hit harder than you probably know." Ava didn't respond. "I didn't see who you were back then. And I never said I was sorry." He paused. "But I am." Ava looked him in the eyes, steady and composed. You didn't see me because you weren't looking. That apology is yours to carry. He shifted awkwardly. You're incredible, Ava. She gave a small nod. I always was. You just didn't stay long enough to find out. With that, she turned away, leaving him standing alone amid a hallway full of Ava's name badges and welcome banners. There was no bitterness in her voice, only a calm sense of finality. The apology came too late, and it didn't need to be accepted. Ava had nothing left to prove. Weeks later, Ava was informed of a major corporate acquisition. Bennett Textiles was merging with another manufacturing firm, ironically, one where Daniel had tried to secure a leadership position. But after news of Ava's leadership and rising influence, the other company chose Bennett's structure over Daniel's. Rachel's father, embarrassed by the fallout, pulled funding from Daniel's project. Rachel, furious, confronted Ava at a networking event. You destroyed everything, she hissed. Ava remained calm. I didn't destroy anything. I just refused to stay broken. Rachel's voice shook. He said you'd never make it. That you were weak. Ava looked her straight in the eye. Then maybe you should ask yourself why he needed to tear me down in order to build you up. The silence that followed was louder than any insult. Rachel stormed off. Ava returned to her table, her reputation soaring, her power unshakable, and her dignity intact. The night of the final event, Ava and Sophie drove home in quiet satisfaction. The road stretched ahead, city lights fading in the rearview mirror. Did you ever think this would happen? Sophie asked, leaning her head against the window. Ava glanced at her daughter, then back at the road. No, she answered softly. But I never stopped hoping for something better. Sophie smiled. You're really the boss now. Ava laughed. Maybe. But the best thing I ever did was become your mom. They pulled into the driveway of their modest home, still the same one they had struggled to keep years ago. It looked different now, not because of what it was, but because of what they had built inside it. Ava unlocked the door, set her purse down, and looked around with gratitude. No spotlight, no applause, just quiet strength, earned the hard way. And in that silence, Ava finally felt at peace. Not because she had won, but because she had never given up.